Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 337 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the potential impacts and downfalls or pitfalls of formal authority. So as a leader, you will have some sort of formal authority. What does that mean? And what could be the downsides of that? Let's get into this topic right now. So one of the types of power we have in workplaces is that of formal power, which comes from the formal authority you hold in the workplace. So as a leader of any kind, you will have some sort of formal authority, which might be you can sign off leave requests, you can approve business cases or purchase orders, or you can create new projects, or you can manage people's performance reviews. All those sorts of things are part of your formal role and your formal authority. Now, the important thing to remember here is that your formal authority is not yours. It comes from your position. So anybody in your role would have the same types of authority. Now, the reason for this episode today is that I see formal authority going wrong quite a bit. And there's a couple of reasons for that, and which we'll talk about shortly. So formal authority, the first thing that can go wrong with formal authority is that people may not challenge your ideas or the process that you're using, for example. So because you have a leadership role and a role of authority or power, some people may feel uncomfortable challenging you. And so whatever you come up with may be agreed with, and people might just take your lead on things when actually maybe they're not the best. It's not the best lead to be following. So as an example, in the last couple of months, I've been dealing with a bunch of leaders, and I've been in a few meetings where I've noticed someone with the most formal authority keeps taking the meeting off track. Like they might talk for a long time, they might talk about irrelevant points, and they're actually making the meeting last for a lot longer. But because they're the most authoritative, as in they have the highest formal power in the room, that's the most senior role, people don't really challenge that. They sort of just go along with it and let the meeting go for a long time. And it's really, it's not helping. It's actually taking longer. It's making people more inefficient, but people put up with it because of that formal authority. Another thing I see is that people, if you're in a leadership role with formal authority, people might not raise problems or give you any feedback about what's going on. They might feel uncomfortable, and telling you there's an issue might mean that they get in trouble, and they might not give you any feedback on how you're performing either. And leaders often suffer from a lack of feedback because of this formal authority barrier that exists. And it's important to also remember that even though you might consider yourself to be quite a nice person and you're not really directive or authoritarian, your formal role, if it's a senior role, can actually still be a barrier to people talking to you honestly, even if you're not a tyrant. So you might think, well, I'm very nice and I get along with my team, but make no mistake, your formal role is a little bit of a barrier, and it can be depending on the personalities of the people in your team as well. So another issue you can have is that people might not contribute ideas, people might not speak up, and might not tell you the idea that they think is a good one to pursue because maybe you've put your idea on the table already and they're just going to go with that one because it's easier. So what you can see happening here is that there's a risk that you might be stuck in your own echo chamber where you don't really get access to good ideas or better ways of doing things or good feedback because no one is willing to give you that. And as I said, even if you are a nice, friendly leader who gets along with people, your formal role can still be a bit of a barrier. So one thing that I'd encourage you to do is be very observant of how people are behaving around you. So are they challenging you? Are they agreeing with everything you say? Are they not speaking up? So It's always good to observe that. Do you feel like there's not much friction in terms of, people are just taking your word for things, going with your suggestions all the time? And if they're just agreeing with you all the time, they're not really helping you. They're just doing what you say. So it's really important to be observant about how people are behaving around you. Another thing that can happen with this formal authority is you risk wasting a lot of time, because let's say you give someone feedback about something they've done. People are going to feel compelled to respond to that feedback because you're a senior person. So you want to really make sure that you focus on the most important things and not the minor issues. I was dealing with a stakeholder a couple of years ago as a consultant where they would respond with very minor issues and minor feedback. They would basically raise every little issue under the sun with a report or something like that. And then the team would run around fixing everything because they needed to show that they were listening to this person who was quite senior in the organization. But actually, from my perspective, a lot of the feedback they were giving really wasn't that consequential. And if you didn't action it, it wouldn't really matter. So as a leader with formal authority, you can actually waste a hell of a lot of time of your team if they're just doing stuff that isn't really adding much value because you told them to. So what this means is it's really important to get real feedback from someone who's impartial. So this could be someone like your peers who are at your own level, the same level in your organization. So they won't necessarily be as wary of giving you feedback because they're at the same level as you. Your own boss might be a good source of feedback because they're obviously not going to be scared of telling you anything. Or an external person like a coach or a mentor can be also a useful sounding board and a useful perspective because they don't work for you. And so, one of the benefits of people that work with me, one of the benefits they often say is that, well, you don't work in my workplace and therefore you don't see all the people, you don't know the people, and therefore your advice or your guidance or your questions are basically more objective because I'm not tied into that workplace. So on that note, if you would like some coaching support to try to get that feedback that maybe you're lacking, you can get in touch on, there's a link on the show notes page to my coaching page. So the show notes for this episode is thoughtfleader.com/podcast/337. So I look forward to hearing from you. You can get in touch on that page there and learn more about my coaching. So yeah, that real feedback from someone who's not, they're not going to necessarily take your word for everything because they're not in your line of authority. So that's really precious and important. So one thing I would say as well, it's very important to downplay your formal authority if you're trying to build participation in your team. So if you want an inclusive environment where your team is suggesting ideas and you're able to take their experience and develop, the best options for whatever you're trying to solve at the time, you want to take people's ideas and run with them. You want to be available for people to speak to. So this is the open door policy type thing. Actually, there is an episode on the having an open door policy and what that means and, how to do it properly. I'll put a link to that in the show notes page as well. You also want to interact with your team frequently and make yourself quite available. So you're out on the floor, as it were, talking to people, getting to know them and building that participation. So you're trying to reduce the barrier that your formal authority provides. Sometimes I've found it useful as well if you're in a role where you have to make a decision as a team. And obviously as the leader, you could probably just make a decision, but you might want your team to be more involved. And what can be helpful sometimes is to just take yourself as the leader out of the decision-making process and say, okay, team, you work out, you go and have a chat about what you think the best thing to do is, and you tell me what you agree, and we'll work from there. Because when you take yourself out of the room and out of the process, sometimes the discussions can be much more open and honest with each other without being, people feeling concerned that they have to watch what they say because you're in the room. So the last point I'll make here as well on formal authority, I've actually seen it used as a bit of a shield by insecure leaders who really don't want to be challenged. because some leaders rely on that formal authority, their position of power, so that people don't challenge them. And it's important not to fall into that trap, because what you'll have is a team that doesn't say anything. They might not be as engaged because they just take your word for everything. They basically just do what you say. So it means that you have to rely on your own experience a lot more and your knowledge. But gone are the days where you are going to be the most knowledgeable and experienced person in your team. Often, employees bring a lot of their own experience and intelligence and skills to the table that may be different than yours, and you want to harness those to get the best outcome. And just be aware that it will feel comfortable not to be challenged. So as the boss of your team, no matter what level you are, it may feel good that, your team's just doing what I want. That can feel great, but that is a trap. That is a trap. And I remember one day, years ago, I was a manager, and I was interviewing somebody who was going to take on a management role under me in an organization. And we interviewed one guy, and he was really challenging during the interview. He asked me a lot of questions. Oh, what are your plans for the group? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And he did it in a constructive way. But it was actually quite daunting during the interview, because I thought, oh, wow, this person is really going to challenge me when they come in, because they have high standards and they want to do a good job, and they want to support me, but they also want to challenge me at the same time. And I actually hired that person, and they were a really good hire in the end. But it would have been easier for me to take someone on board who just didn't push much, didn't challenge me at all. So it's really important to actually make sure you are being challenged in the right way, because it can feel comfortable not to be challenged. But eventually you might find that your ideas are stale and you're not getting the best results from your team. So I'm interested in your perspective on this one as well. What do you see as the impact of formal authority? Do you find yourself sometimes concerned that your team aren't speaking up as much because of your position? I'd love to hear what you think. You can leave a comment on Spotify, or you can leave a comment on the show notes page, which was thoughtfulleader.com/podcast/337. I look forward to hearing from you. Once again, if you enjoy this podcast, I'd love you to leave a positive review on your app of choice as well. If you could do that, it helps me get the word out about Thoughtful Leader Podcast and help different leaders around the world just like you. So thank you for listening once again, and I'll be back next week.